makes available at least one current copy of the Open Meetings Act, which is posted on the west wall of the meeting room and accessible to members of the public. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Your votes, please.
Aye.
The motion passes. First, we will have Dr. Nielsen give us an update on some reports that were recently released.
Thank you. Good evening. The NSCAS AQuest data has all been released, and it was released last Wednesday, the 23rd at 10 a.m. It is on the state website, so if you go to the state's education profile, you will find it there. But the NSCAS is the Nebraska Student-Centered Assessment System, and that encompasses all of the assessments that we give to our students, grades 3 through 8 and 11, but it also encompasses our ELPA assessment that we administer to our EL students, and any other ACT and those pieces. So it would encompass any assessment that we do that is reported back to the state. The AQuest is a quality education system today and tomorrow, and it really is where we are at this point in time and what our data is showing and where we need to go. It is a guide. It focuses districts on how they can continue to move forward. So there are a couple pieces that I want to go through. There's some pieces that I want to highlight. There's some pieces that I also want to bring attention to, but I also want to talk about what are we doing to address some of our areas of growth. Because we know we have areas of growth and we've got to figure out how are we addressing them and how do we continue to move forward. So as you look at the data in front of you, you have the first piece that really focuses on grades 3 through 8. Notice that the year that we're starting with is 2021. 1920, there were no assessments given because of the pandemic. And so the 2021 year is really our baseline. We are saying this is where we are beginning, and this is, as we look at students, this is where we are moving forward from. Because there were drops from 18-19 to 2021. And we expected that just because of what the pandemic brought. So, you have reading, you have math, and you have science. This is the first year science was given. Last year it was given, but it was just a field test. So it was not a reportable assessment at that point in time. The other chart that you have down there is the reading growth and the math growth. And when you look at cohorts, and so what I wanted to look at is truly look at where are our students growing. So were they growing from 3rd to 4th grade, from 4th to 5th, from 5th to 6th, and so on. As you can see, there are quite a few areas that we did have growth. Some that was more significant than others, but in the reading area, we maintained our percent proficient for most grades, or we grew. Math area, if you look at that, we did have some significant growth. With some of the grades of students, the 7th to 8th grade did go down in percent proficient. When you look at all of those, you are looking at the percent proficient of the number of students that we have in our district. That is what we are looking at with those percents. As you go to the back, and I will talk more in depth about some of these points as we continue to move forward, but as you go to the back, you then look at, this is our 3rd year cohort for our 11th grade students. You can see the ACT data, and the ACT data, again, we took it from 2021 to 21-22, and the top part shows you the percent proficient with our 3rd year cohort, and to be proficient, you have to have, on the English language arts, you have to have an 18 or above. Math, 18 or above, and science has to be a 19 or above on the ACT. Now, the ACT mean score. When you look at the next chart, this comes from all of our ACT data. Because we know our juniors are not the only ones that are taking it. We have seniors that are taking it, we have sophomores that are taking it. And so what we've done is taken our statistics, combined them, and looked at what is the Beatrice Composite Mean Score. This also then allows students, they may take it multiple times. And so they then are given the best score on the ACT. When you compare that to the state composite mean score and then the states with 80% participation rates, you can see that when we have all of our students who take the assessment, we are doing, mostly we are falling above the state and above the states with 80% participation rates. So that was nice to see in that chart down below. The blue line is us, and that you can see that we are overall performing at a higher level than the state and other states that have that 80% participation rate. So some interesting points about that NSCAS, and that really goes back to that first page of data. When you look at students who were not proficient on the NSCAS through year in the spring, some of the things that I want you to be aware of, because I will tell you there are many districts that are looking at these data points and saying, okay, how valid is the data that we're receiving back? Is it valid? Is it reliable? Is it usable for us as teachers? There were students that scored in the 84th and 92nd percentile according to our map, according to the NSCAS score that was given to them, and they were just on track. So the state did not deem them college and career ready. There are also students that scored in the 53rd percentile, which is above average or right around average, that were not on track. They were below standards. So that's the part that, as we look at that first page, those are the pieces that we've talked about with our students, with staff, with the state, and looking and saying, okay, hold on, how can an average child, someone at the 53rd percentile, not be on track? Are we saying average is not okay anymore? What are we saying? So those are the questions that have come up. Those are the things that we are looking at. And that is sometimes hard to explain to parents when they come to you and say, but my child's, what, in the 92nd percentile, but they were just on track? Wow. That's interesting. So those are the things I will tell you that we are wrestling with as we continue with this assessment. It is fairly new, and we've been giving it for the last 4 or 5 years, but our cut scores were the cut scores that the state and the group created within NSCAS were much more rigorous than ACT cut scores. And so that is a question that we continue to look at and say, okay, if ACT is really a college and career ready test or college entrance exam, but we're saying our cut scores are more rigorous than this college entrance exam, is that okay? So those are pieces that we're continuing to look at, because again, our goal is to understand that a child is made up of so much more than a test score. And that's where we want to look at and help parents understand that too. Yes?
Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but can you explain to me what it means that you're on track and what it means you're college and career ready?
Yes, so on track would mean that you were proficient. That means that you meet the cut score that the state has determined within the NSCAS level. So if I'm a third grader, it might be on English language arts, it might be a 2030 that I have to, it is a score that they have said, this is what puts you as on track. If you're a college career ready, it might be a 2130. So it is just a score that they get based upon the number of questions you get right. And the nice thing is teachers can look through the questions and figure out, okay, this third grader took it. Here's the standard. The standard was this language arts 3.1.2. It was an easy question. Student got it right, so they moved on. And then the next one was a medium question about that standard. They got it wrong. Well, their score is going to be more so probably developing if they are not getting those medium and those hard questions correct.
What
So-
percent of parents do you think actually understand all of this? I mean, I'm,
Very,
Great
You?
question.
yeah.
I mean,
That
I'm
is-
not,
yes.
I mean, is this just, then the parent feels good, they can say, oh, my child is college and career ready, and somebody else feels bad because their child is only on track? And what benefit is that to them, to us, to them, to anybody?
Yep, and that is the part where if they do call, if they talk to their teachers, those are the things that we explain. And we talk about what are the other data pieces that we have about their child, not just this one test. Because we know that this test is given, this year it is given fall, winter, and spring. And so our students are able to see it, which will help them understand what the assessment's asking. But previous years, it was given just in the spring. And it was a one-shot test. And it was very hard if a child came in that day and they were maybe tired or something had happened. I mean, most of the times, our teachers could sense it and would push it off for that particular child. But when a parent calls you and says, okay, why is my student not performing well? Then you have to go back to the other pieces and say, okay, well, how are they doing in the classroom? Because it could have just been the day. It could have been the passage that they were given, they didn't want to read it because it was boring to them. Because we know sometimes test passages are not the most exciting things to read. So those are the things, there's so many different pieces that, now, do we want our scores to increase? Yes. We want our students to be proficient. We want our students to be successful. And those are the things that we're continuing to push for. But we're also understanding that there's more to a child than just a test score.
I don't understand paragraph 3 then. In your 84th percentile and you're only on track, and the other one's 82 and you're better than on track, but in the paragraph below, paragraph
Yes.
above, it's better to be.
Those are the contradictions that we are seeing, and those are the things that we're struggling with as districts. As a curriculum specialist who looks at this data, I will tell you, I've sat here and struggled with it because I don't understand at times. And so those are the pieces that, to look at a parent and have that phone call and have to tell them, well, yeah, sorry, your child just didn't make it. Well, why not? They're 70th percentile. Well, I don't know. I mean, and so those are, yes, that is where I struggle with that piece because it doesn't, as I look at it, it doesn't make sense.
How many calls do you get?
Very few. And that's the thing, is we send home all the reports. I don't know how many parents look at them. I don't know how many parents understand them when they get them, and we provide them with the state piece that goes through what the scores mean.
Yeah, I received one of those.
Yes.
I looked and that was, you would have to send it, you would have to attend a class to understand, I believe. You would have to be,
As long as
Like,
I didn't have a quiz.
it would have to be like, it would have to be an in-service for parents to, you know. I kind of struggle with all of this a little bit, you know.
Okay, so the next part that we talked about then are classifications and designations. Classifications are what each district has a classification. Each building has a classification. Classifications can be one of 4. So either needs improvement, good, great, or excellent. As you look at our district and our buildings, at this point in time, all of our district and all of our buildings, except for Paddock Lane, are classified as good. Paddock Lane is classified as great because they did make growth in their assessments. So, in the proficiency of students, they made growth. The other thing that we are looking at is we also have designations. So as we look at the designations, they really look at subgroups. Regarding designations, you have Paddock Lane in middle school, are additional targeted support and improvement in the areas of special education. So that means that the subgroup of special education has not made significant growth. So it's an area that we have to figure out, how do we address students with needs that maybe have those gaps? How do we continue to close those gaps? As we look at Stoddard and the middle school, they are ATSI in the area of Hispanic. This means that our subgroup of Hispanic has a lower proficiency rate as well. And now, when you look at the subgroup of Hispanic, some of those students are English learner students. And so again, how do we provide services? And one of the things that we will continue to talk about, and we are working with the newspaper, we'll work with Queeby, is to share, what are we doing in those areas? So what are we doing, what are we providing for our special education students that really target their growth, and what are we providing for our English learners that really help them move forward in language acquisition? So at the high school, they are targeted support and improvement for special education. So we are ATSI because we have been 3 years in TSI with those subgroups. So that is why we've moved over to additional targeted support and improvement. If we stay in ATSI for 3 years, then we will move into CSI, comprehensive support and improvement. And that brings about additional things that we will have to do as a district and plans that we will have to create that really focus on those subgroups. And I will tell you, we are already doing amazing things with to target students that need that extra support, students that need that extra push, to really help them focus on how can we close the gap, how can we help them be successful when they get to these assessments and when they're learning. Okay, the next part is another piece that kind of shows, it is a very interesting chart. If you look at it from starting in 14-15 to 21-22, this is our chronic absenteeism rate. And if you think about it, chronic absenteeism plays a strong part in student proficiency and growth. Because if students are not in classrooms, it's very hard for them to learn. In 14-15, you can see that the district percent for chronic absenteeism was 12.98%. In 21-22 last year, the district percent doubled. 24.37% of our students are chronically absent.
What
What's
equates to
What's the
chronic absence?
definition, of chronic
Yeah.
absence? Is it 10 days when you get turned over to the county attorney?
It's 10 days is really what's going to push you past. Now, 20 days is what's gonna get you turned over to the county attorney. But 10 days is where the state's going to say you're starting to move into that chronically absent.
So when I'm looking at this, we've got 2,000 students and you're saying 500.
Yes. Yes. That is a lot of students.
It's a lot of students.
Yeah. So, and
Does this include every absence?
it does not include activities or doctors, anything that's excused.
Oh, so it's just the,
It
the
is
not being
truly
there.
the
Has to be a
unexcused.
doctor's excuse. If I come
That-
in and say Maddie is sick and Laura is sick,
Yeah,
that is.
now,
Parent
that's the
called
thing.
in, that's not an excused absence.
Exactly, a parent calling in is not an excused absence. It is an absence that we say we know it's, I'm not gonna take my child to the doctor every time they're sick. But yeah, that is what, and what's interesting is, when you look at it, if you look at across the board, elementary students tend to be in classrooms more than if you look at, it just grows as we move to the high school. But even having 13%, I mean, Stoddard went from 6.82 to 13, they doubled. Most of these have doubled. And if you look at it, after COVID or after the pandemic, it is really when we have seen the increase rise. And so I will tell you, one of those things that we are having a conversation about is, this is a community piece. How do we address this as a community? How do we come together to help families? Because the school cannot do it all. We need help and support from everyone in this community to really help address this piece. So what are we doing to look and help continue to grow our teachers, to continue to grow ourselves? One of the things that we have been doing this year is we have brought in Dr. Chad Dumas, and he worked with us last year. And he is working with our elementary teachers really on focusing and determining what their priority standards are and how do we help understand where each kid is with each priority standard. So if we taught all the standards that were given to us from the state and from the federal entities that we might use our PE standards from the federal level, it would take 23 years to fully teach those to every single child. We don't have 23 years. So we've got to prioritize and we've got to focus them down. So that is what our teachers have really been doing, is trying to figure out how to focus. We cannot teach the kids everything, so how do we prioritize and teach them what is important? So he has spent a lot of time, and we've had some great discussions and great ahas with that professional development. The other thing that we are looking at doing is NSCAS through year. Again, we are choosing to administer the NSCAS through year fall, winter, and spring. If our students are proficient in the fall, then they stay proficient for the whole year. If our students show proficiency in the winter, they again are proficient throughout the whole year. So that is one nice thing, but the other piece is if students see the assessment, it does help them feel a little bit more comfortable with the assessment. It helps them see what's on the assessment so that they are able to meet those targets. Now, the other thing is, if you look at that last paragraph though, there are some cons to this assessment. We've utilized the math growth for a long time, and parents have seen those math growth reports for a long time to where you've seen that cumulative growth of your child. This assessment, our NSCAS through year, does not give our teachers as much data to help them understand what students are. And they have to dig a lot through the system and through the data and through each child in order to truly figure out where the gaps are. So we are hoping that they continue to find ways to improve the system, and they are talking about how they are finding ways to improve the system, but I will tell you, there's always positives and negatives with everything, and that is one of the pieces that we are looking at that we're missing. And that's why those assessments in the classroom are so important and so vital, because that really is going to help us determine where the gaps are.
Are you able to benchmark us against like-sized schools with like demographics, such as approximate same number of special ed kids, poverty rates, all that type of
Yep.
data, and just to see how we compare, you know?
And if you go onto the system, yep, we looked at that today during our administrative team meeting. If you go onto the system, there is a place where you can go compare. And you can compare to our peers. Our peers are similar in demographics, similar in size, similar in the even makeup of the community. And when you look at that, I will tell you, we fall right either middle of the group, or we tend to be in the upper part of that group. Now, there might be a few areas, and I think Mr. Suter has some data that he is going to share with ACT that shows where we fit in those comparisons. I can also bring back data with the NSCAS 3 through 8, and we can look at even buildings specific to those comparisons, but right now, we tend to fall right in the middle of that group with the NSCAS 3 through 8. Yep. And then we can also, patrons can compare it geographically too, which is not always the best, because the nice thing about the peers is you're comparing more apples to apples. So, I mean, yes, there's still differences, but it's more similar than our geographic location.
I think that, I'm just gonna stop a second.
Yeah.
I'm trying very hard not to say very much, you're doing an excellent job. But I just wanna stop at that point right there, because so many times we have people show up to our board meetings and wanna compare us to our neighbors in our region. And that is like comparing an apple to an orange, because you cannot take a district with 25% special education, so 1 in 4 students identified with a special need, and compare it to a district that has 7%. and expect to see the same type of results. It's not gonna happen. You can't take a school district that has 32% diversity and compare it to a school district that has 12% diversity. English language learners, non-English learners. It just doesn't work that way. So at all times when those comparisons are made, I think the important thing to remember is there are times, in answer to Eric's question where we can compare ourselves to like-sized schools with like-sized characteristics, but there are, for the most part, those maybe are gonna be a little bit more comparable, but when we talk about regionally and we hear that, there's some very dangerous things that are being compared there that really can't be.
Are we unique with this absenteeism rate, or is this?
No.
We are not unique with this absenteeism. It is across the state. And I know that other newspapers, other entities have done articles on it. This is what most school districts, and actually it's nationwide. What we are seeing is just an increase in students not attending.
Okay, so what's happening to the 33%? I know that would affect the graduation rate, but
Yeah.
where are these kids and what is happening to them? I mean, where are they?
That is the hard part, and I will tell you, we do make home visits to try and pick up kids. We do, but that only goes so far.
I mean, do they go
They're-
on and get a GED then? They can't be graduating, and probably, when you look at your graduation rate of being 83%, that's 17% that are still, 16 to 17% that are still graduating, even though they're not in the building. Is that correct? Am I looking at that correctly?
I mean, that would be,
Because here
Yes,
you're looking
you
at
could-
66% of your students are in the building, 33% are not, but our graduation rate was 83%. So some of these who are chronically absent are still graduating.
yes.
But I don't know if it'd be that high,
Yeah.
because some of them
Well-
never get to that point.
Maddie had asthma. She was chronically absent.
Mm-hmm.
She graduated 402.
Right.
There are medical pieces that come into play.
Right.
That there are sometimes, you just have to work with the child and you find other alternative ways to educate that child. There are other things, and we kind of have talked about this morning, is that there might be students that just choose not to come, and,
I guess I'm wondering what happens to them in society?
They do the same thing at work.
Oh, they're working? I mean,
Well,
I
a third
guess,
of the time.
Yeah.
I guess, I'm just thinking, do we have 15 to 17% of students, what are they doing if they don't have even a high school education?
Yes.
Where are they?
and I would say Mr. Suter's gonna talk about graduation rate. When we get to that, I don't think it's as high as that 15 to 17. I really think it's more 8 to 9%